Hello, everyone, and welcome to Your Mind, Your Reality, Your Results, a weekly show where I get to interview amazing experts in different fields to help you change your mindset so you can have the incredible results you want in your life and in your business. I'm so thrilled today to be welcomed by Nicole Lewis-Keeber. Welcome, Nicole. Thanks for coming to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm already tripping over words. Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Oh, excellent. And if you haven't met me before, my name's Leah Fink. I'm the owner and founder of All Thrive. We run amazing workshops where we focus on skill development, personal development, and mental health. And if you want to learn more, you can always check out my profile. So let's start, Nicole, why don't you tell everyone a little bit about yourself and your journey that led you here today?
Yeah, thank you. So I have a master's degree in social work. Here's all the stuff, right? I have an MSW. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I was a psychotherapist for 18 years. And I worked in direct practice and in clinical setting for mental health. And you name it, I've worked with people in that capacity. And after leaving working in direct practice as a therapist, I was looking for a way to work with people still in a very meaningful way, but with a different energy and different capacity. And so I dipped my toe into the world of coaching to see what that might look like. And I started my business as a money mindset coach after I got certified, and began to explore this connection between trauma and money. And as I kind of, learned more and more about how money and trauma were deeply connected and was impacting the clients that I was working with, because I was working with a lot of business owners and leaders. And it opened up my mind in so many ways personally in my own business to see how, unidentified, seemingly insignificant experiences as a child were actually trauma responses that were showing up in my own business and also the clients I was working with. So I kind of doubled down doing research on the intersection of trauma and entrepreneurship and how your relationship with your business can be healthy and supportive as opposed to demanding and demeaning. So that's kind of what I do now.
Yeah. Well, and I think we've all had those moments at least of feeling like our business is quite demanding, hopefully not demeaning. But I love the experience you're bringing to this to be able to speak to pieces like trauma too, that you a little bit of that clinical background, which I'm sure helps with this topic.
Mm-hmm.
I want to mention too, as people are watching this and you realize the wonderful expertise you have in front of you, please do feel free to use the comment box to ask us questions or add your own experience. We certainly love engaging with you guys. That's also the case if you're not watching this live. If you're watching this after the fact, please feel free to put comments and questions in the chat there, and we will get back to you so you can get those questions answered.
Yes, so happy to circle back.
Yeah. So Nicole, why don't you start too, when we're talking about trauma and all of these pieces, love your business might seem a far step away for people. But what really does that mean to you? Like, how do people maybe start this process or associate those words together?
Yeah, so I think that it's important to note, particularly if you're a founder, that you are not your business, even though maybe your brand might be you, or even the intellectual property behind it, like with my business, might be yours. However, you are not your business. It is something outside of you that you are relating to. Even though you're creating it, you're still relating to it. And because of this, it really is a ripe arena for some of the ways that we relate to others and some of the experiences that we have that impact our role in relationships can play itself out in our business. And so I always like to tell people, I'm like, listen, your business is not you. It is something else. You're relating to it. And why not choose the relationship you want to have with it as opposed to defaulting into sometimes toxic behavior patterns and roles and relationships that maybe you experienced previously in your life that informed how you see yourself in relationships. Set the intention as opposed to default, because we will default into those roles. And it usually takes a moment. People have a pause, right? And you're like, what do you mean? I mean, how many times you heard people say, my business is my baby? And I always say to them, I don't want my business to be my baby. I want it to be a fully functioning adult and partner that can help me. And so I think it's important for people it's a nice entryway into understanding how those childhood trauma experience could impact your business in a way that's a little bit more approachable.
Yeah. I really like that. My perspective is all about relationship, and that we have relationships to all parts of the world. So I like that you can highlight that and really bring it to people, that it's not just that they have a business, that they care about their business, but it can actually be, this relationship with relationship patterns, the same way you have patterns in your normal relationships, and how to interact. And I certainly hope that I'm moving towards that I'll have a business, right, that is a mature adult co-partner versus
Yes.
the baby.
It's so funny. I was going through this process with someone really early out when this concept came to me, and I can always share how that kind of happened. And she said, funnily enough, right now I'm working through this in my business. She's like, and I just joined a dating service. And she said, what's so funny to me is that what I want from the partnership in my business, like this ethereal partnership in my business, really lines up with the wish list I have for the partner I'm building for my profile on my dating website. And she was just laughing. She's like, how weird is that? And I'm like, it's not weird to me at all. How we want to feel supported is how we want to feel supported. And our business is a way to support ourselves. So, yeah.
And I wonder if that's one of the reasons too, that people can feel so much like their business is them. Because one of the things I truly see, even for people who are not entrepreneurs, who are working as an employee in a job, is that, your personal values, which is the same I would hear for this woman, should be super aligned with your business values. And if they're not, that's probably where you're having some problems and not enjoying your job, which I see as kind of the same idea.
Yeah, they're very similar. And in fact, one of the things that we do, in Love Your Business School is identify those values. How do you want to feel about your business? How do you want to feel in your business? What do you value? And then what do those values then look like in practice with your mission, your vision, policies, procedures, boundaries, like whatever that may be? Really understanding what your values are personally, I think sometimes can influence, what we think about our business as being us. But it's still something outside of us that we're creating or we are relating to.
I love that. So for people who are, listening right now, who are on their path of realizing maybe there's some things happening for them that they weren't quite as aware of, and they want to start this journey, obviously you're an amazing resource that I would encourage people to reach out to. But if they're not yet at that point and wanting to do some exploration for themselves, where would you recognize they start? Is it with values, or is there a next step past that?
So what I always ask people to do is, and I kind of usually give them this as an example to say that, I didn't always own a business. I worked for other people in some capacity. So when I started my own business, and at about 2 years in, I started to recognize that I didn't want to go to work, right? I was having the Sunday sads, where I'm like, I don't want to get up and do this thing. And I started to recognize that I was feeling very disempowered within my business. I was feeling very much like it was out of control. I didn't feel like I was getting any wins at the end of the day. My impression of what my clients were getting from me, they were telling me they were happy, and yet I was still feeling like it wasn't enough. There was a disconnect there, and it was weighing on me emotionally. And when I recognized that I was feeling that way because I had set up my relationship with my business to be a replicative dynamic that I had with authority figures growing up because of many reasons, that I had set my business up to not support me. I had set it up to be a way that I was working out the fact that I wasn't enough. I wasn't worthy, wasn't enough, wasn't smart enough, any of those things, this old language, old narrative that I had worked on as a therapist and had gotten distance from, but this is a new place, right? It's a new way for those things to work out. No one's looking through their trauma in their business. No one's doing that. And so what I ask other people to do is assess and evaluate how you are feeling about your business right now. Do you feel like it supports you outside of just the financial piece of it? Does it feel fulfilling? Is there some, I call it stealthy intentions in your business where my business is I'm supposed to be able to prove something to my dad about my business, or I'm supposed to feel powerful and strong within my business. Are there expectations that you have for your business that are kind of outside of its actual job description? And so start to assess, how are you feeling about your business, in your business, and what are the emotions, behaviors that are coming up for you around it? And then I ask people to say, I always ask them, where have you felt this way before? Right?
Yeah.
And so it's starting to assess, do you feel supported by your business, or do you feel like it's just one more place in your life where you're not measuring up? Right? And so we start there with, where are you at when you think about your business as a relationship? Does it feel supported, or does it feel like it's a place you don't measure up? And kind of start there.
Yeah. That's a powerful thing to hear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's hard enough when we work with someone else, right? When we have an employer and we're working out some of those things that we feel about ourselves in our job and our career, something else completely when it's the thing that you created, right?
That makes sense. So maybe I think we might want to take a step back for a moment, because some people might be listening to this and be interested, but be saying, oh, you know what? I had a pretty good life. I had a pretty good childhood. I don't have any trauma.
Mm-hmm.
So, when you hear that, or do you want to kind of give a definition of trauma, or what that could look like and differently for different people?
Yeah, I always say if you're breathing, you've got trauma. So, and it sounds dramatic, but there's some truth in that. In that, when we define trauma in the ways that it is definable, I think people kind of access it a little bit differently. So, so let's define it. As a culture and as a society, we tend to look at trauma as what we call big T trauma, which is, it's big, it's kind of catastrophic. Maybe it's happens without, like it happens to you. It's maybe violent, PTSD, those type of things. So that's what we typically think of when we think of trauma. And that is one type of trauma. And there's also another type, which I call little t, or some people call it small t trauma. And it's no less powerful, but it looks different. And so it's typically like cumulative experiences that you had in your formative years growing up, where you're just downloading all the information around you about who you are in the world, right? And how you see yourself. And they can be experiences that are seemingly insignificant to someone else, but had a real big impact on you. And it can be cumulative in nature. Like, I had a learning difference growing up that was undiagnosed. And so every day I went to school, they did not know how to teach me. That experience was traumatic for me because it changed how I saw myself. And I was not dumb. I just was not able to understand the way I was being taught, but it made me feel stupid, right? And so I carried that shame around that into all of my experiences and learning. It came into my business. But most people wouldn't look at that and say, hey, that's a trauma. They would say, well, it was just rough, or everybody had a rough childhood, or we all had challenges. But my nervous system doesn't give, what about the fact that it was just this. My nervous system responded to it as if it was a trauma, because it was cumulative in nature, and it changed how I saw myself. It changed my nervous system and basically my biochemistry, and so a lot of people will look at that and not see that as a trauma, but it is. It was a small t trauma. It could be, maybe you got bullied. Maybe you had a parent who was sick, and so you had to be a caregiver soon. Always the new kid on the block because you moved around a lot, so you had to modify who you were depending on who you were with. Maybe you had a friend group that all of a sudden, for no reason, stopped talking to you. These experiences can be very traumatic, and we don't look at them as such. And so we minimize them and we dismiss them. And so we don't get the proper, I think, assistance and help in moving that through our nervous system and moving it through our awareness of who we are and kind of digesting it. And so I always say that big T trauma explodes and small t trauma erodes, but they are both powerful enough to move a mountain.
Wow. Yeah, that definition is definitely far more encompassing. And I almost wonder, when I hear that definition too, and you're talking about these people, whether it's in an employee role or whether it's in an entrepreneur role, that are having this constant dissatisfaction, that can also be like long-term friction trauma that sits with you and that just reinforces itself constantly of how much you hate it, reinforcing all those little t traumas it came from, and just continuing that whole cycle.
Absolutely. And it's how we kind of experience the thing, what we tell ourselves about the thing, the decisions we make about it, it really does impact us. And I don't think people recognize that impact of those experiences on their thoughts, feelings, and behaviors as adults, in their career, in their business, in their relationships. That friend group turning on you, maybe when you're 12, that can absolutely impact how you see yourself and your business and the trust factor that you have with the people within it, with our business partner or clients that that hire you. And then you look at them and you look at them as far as like, are they going to stay? I don't trust this relationship that we have now developed here. It's too good to be true, or they'll leave, or any of those things start to run in our nervous system. And so every day I see people's small t trauma playing out in their business in ways that are very detrimental to their bottom line financially and emotionally.
Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense to me. And both the pain that would cause as you're sitting with it and believing that it's some fault of your own. And I'm just thinking of how much easier sometimes these pieces are to see from the outside. I think we've all got that person that we're like, ooh, I could see this relating to them, and a little bit less, how does this relate to me, is a bit harder to look at.
Yeah, I always say can't read your own label. We need people to come alongside us, even if it's just a good friend or, someone who can, kind of help us start to unpack it a little bit. And I think, again, that's where the, idea of having the relationship with your business is helpful, because it's a way to frame it and begin to look at it. And, I have people who will talk about this and they just want to burn their business down because they recognize that they've made it unmanageable. They've burnt themselves out. It's unmanageable. And I always tell them, I'm like, you can burn it down, but you're still going to build the next thing. So let's talk about this.
Exactly what I was thinking.
How can you build a business that you love and that loves you back? Because it is possible.
So we've had kind of these first steps. We have this awareness of values. We have starting to explore this situation. What would the next step be for people as they're continuing along this journey, or how do you help them with the next step?
So when I think about like the love your business process that I take people through, I always ask them to write down a list of characteristics of, if your business was a person, right, and you were defining a partnership that you want to have, what would the characteristics be? How do you want to feel? How do you want to be supported? What does it look like? And then I get really kind of whimsical with them and ask them to create a persona or an energy for their business, because we relate to things easier. That's why when people tell you to relate to your inner critic, they say give it a name, because it's easier to relate to something that's tangible. So I ask them to create, an energy, a persona, a picture, something in relationship to their business and the relationship they want to have with it. And then we write love letters back and forth. And it seems really whimsical, but there's actually some real research around, I forget the name of it. It's a design framework around writing that love letter to your business and then having it write one back to you. Now, granted, you have to write it, but it puts you in the driver's seat of really defining what this emotionally sustainable business will look like. And so that's the most fun thing that I do is, have people go through that process. So, right now, if you're thinking about who would I want my business to be and how do I want to feel in relationship to it, what would that commitment be that you make to it? What would that letter look like? And if the romantic love piece of it doesn't resonate, think of it as a lifelong friend or a partner, someone that you really is kind of your best friend. What would you say to them? So it's a fun process to go through.
Yeah. To propose to your business. Will you please be mine forever? Yeah.
Yes, I promise you all these things.
Yeah.
And you promise me all these things, and we're going to do this. And this is, again, the values piece. Like, these are the values that we profess. And this is what our mission and our vision looks like, and what we're going to do together. I promise you that I will do this thing. And I hope that you will do this thing for me. And it's really fun. And, there are times when those letters end up being breakup letters because the business is not the business that person wants to have. And they built it for a reason outside of what they really wanted. And so it becomes a breakup letter and they start something new, but at least they've been through the process. So
that was actually going to be my next question, is either what do you see as the shift in people's businesses? Like, is it a doable shift often, or is it a lot of people that end up finding that they are not able now? They've created this unmanageable monster.
So I would say 80% of the time it's a stick and stay, right? They've learned what they want and they're taking the business that they have and improving the relationship with it. And they're assessing their capacity. They've done the values work. They're setting up really clear boundaries with themselves. They're doing all those pieces. And so the business becomes much more manageable from a financial standpoint as well as an emotional sustainability standpoint. And so they are able to bring in more revenue, or the revenue that they bring in doesn't have as big of an emotional or capacity toll, right?
Yeah.
Maybe their relationship with their clients feels more secure and there's less dynamic working out there, or they allow their employees to actually do the job they hired them to do as opposed to micromanaging and holding things back because they don't trust and can't rely on them to do all the things. So, sometimes the business looks exactly the same, but the emotional sustainability for all the parties involved is very different. And about 20% of the time, it's I don't want to do this anymore, but now I know what I want to build if I decide to build something else. And they start from that place. So it's really fun to watch what happens with this. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's such a powerful shift.
There's so much agency in it. Right? There's so much agency in it as opposed to feeling like something's done to you, even if it's something you created. It puts you in the seat of power in a way that feels aligned, power with you and your relationship with your business.
Yeah. When I believe a lot of trauma, whether it's small T or big P, does come from like past abuses of relationship, especially if there was a power dynamic, and how much influence that has on your sense of personal power, how much you can influence the world and even obviously your own business, your own life. So that really speaks to me, that piece.
Yeah. Yeah.
So do you find that this is an easy process for people? Is it something that, they do a couple sessions, they realize, they write their letter and they're done? Or is it more like maybe a traditional therapy where if you are going through big T trauma, you're doing the work for a while and it has to be that kind of commitment?
Yeah, I think there's layers, and it's one of the reasons why, I published a book back in the spring called How to Love Your Business. And I think it's a nice entryway for people to kind of start the process because we only have available emotional bandwidth for it in stages, right? And so for some people, they'll start with this process of what relationship do I want to have, and they'll start to build it out from there. And then what they do is they start to recognize, there's probably some more pieces that I can't get to myself that maybe I need to either go through a program or work with Nicole. But it just seems to like it kind of stages itself out and people find themselves moving through the process in ways that, are kind of in chunks that work for them. So a lot of this work actually can be done, on your own, starting to do some unraveling. And then it comes to a point where I always say there's an aha, oh shit, now what? So the aha you can get to, the oh shit's kind of like, I'm sorry for cursing, but it's kind of like, and then the now what, it's really where you need someone to kind of help guide you into those next stages. But there is a process. And so there is a lot of awareness building and a lot of this that people can go through on their own time, because they know their capacity.
Definitely. So how would you work with someone? Because there can be a lot of fear and worry and hesitation, even if things are not going well in your business, to take that step to look at the ahas and oh shits and all that. Is there a certain way you help people get through that, or something you would recommend to people to support them in that first moment of facing fear?
Yeah, so I actually have a trauma and entrepreneurship assessment that we're going to have, I think, a link to. And that's a nice way for people to begin to start so they know what to bring to the conversation with me to determine a few pieces of it. But what it really boils down to is identifying what's working for you and what is not working for you. And is that a business issue? Is it a systems issue? Or is it an underlying emotional issue? Because I always say that I see people putting business solutions on emotional challenges all the time in their business, and that doesn't work. It doesn't get you the relief that you're looking for. So we start to identify what that might be for that person to see why they're not getting relief from the business interventions. And there's so many ways to do this. You can, I have a do no harm program where we look at trauma, its impact on business, all the way over to how it impacts your clients and employees and how they show up with their trauma. So it's kind of a step-by-step process of looking at defining what trauma is for you. Did you experience it? Where has it been minimized and not worked out? How might it be impacting your business, your clients, your employees? And then putting a plan in place to begin to take one thing at a time and begin to remove it from that process and that system. And so it's usually one-on-one coaching because everybody's experience is a little different. So.
Yeah. When, if I could encourage people in a general sense too, if there is a piece of, wanting to deal with this, sometimes it can be harder to want to do these things for yourself, right? Because we all have a little piece of unworthiness worry. And it can be much easier to say, oh, like I'm trying to be responsible. I have clients who are looking to me to support them, or I have employees and wanting to treat them the best possible. And I personally see that very much as an ethical use of power, not, shooting your own problems basically onto other people. So if that's helpful as well for people to think, oh, this trauma just doesn't affect you, and unrecognized pieces in your business don't just affect you. They could be affecting a lot of people that you care about.
Yeah. I trained with Brene Brown 2 years ago to facilitate dare to lead processes, from her book. And she said, a lot of bad leadership and harm happens with leaders who are not self-aware, right, out of their awareness. And I think it comes down to this too, that it's not just about you and your experiences. It's about, also the clients that you have, the employees. And so my goal, and part of why I'm here on this planet and the work I do, is to help people become more trauma conscious as entrepreneurs, not just within how it affects them, but, are you going to fire that client that's being resistant because they're not doing the thing you asked them to do over and over again? Are you just going to fire them, or are you going to recognize that perhaps they're having a trauma response for the things that you're asking them to do, so that you can ask a different question, right? And how you can present yourself to the world in a less traumatizing way to others, to do less harm when it comes to your marketing and your sales and your pricing. There's so much around us. That I think it's trauma and co. They say if you work with people, you work with trauma. It's in the room. So why not recognize it and begin? You don't have to be an expert on it, but being conscious of it can really help you do less harm to yourself and to the people who come in contact with you in your business.
I mean, 100%. It's that piece of awareness, because we're all perceived differently by people. Than we are by ourselves, until we can realize how we are perceiving ourselves and pass that along. Yeah. So going back to the assessment, because I'm certainly very glad that we can offer that as a support for people. Is it something people can also just use for themselves to think about, to help reflect on their own experience and what they're doing with their business?
They absolutely can. They can, it's a very easy thing. It doesn't give you a quiz or score. It's not like a quiz that has a score. It's for you to sit down and think about, right? To assess, first of all, did those experiences I had when I was younger, are they actually defined as trauma? That's the first piece of it. And how do I want to kind of begin to change maybe some of the impact that it has on me? So they can sit down with it and go through the questions and contemplate it themselves. I recommend if you're a business owner and you already have a therapist, take those answers to your therapist to talk about it. Or if you have a coach, talk to them about it, so that you can begin to build some of that awareness. And the relief that comes for people when they look at this and they're like, oh my God, that's what this is. Is pretty awesome to see as well. So I always recommend people start there and just kind of dip their toe in.
That's fantastic. Just before we close, do you have any final thoughts or ideas you'd like to share with the audience?
Just that it's your business and you can build it in a way that supports you emotionally, financially, and systemically. And that, looking at this helps you do that. But it's yours. Don't let anyone else tell you what it has to look like. This is your business. You get designed in a way that works for you and in a way that supports you and your capacity, so it has sustainability over time. right? And this is part of that process.
Well, I love it. And I'd certainly encourage people like Nicole, you're an amazing resource, whether it's questions in the comment or working with you, because, you know, in my view of how I'm really hoping to help people be proactive in their mental wellness, in their personal development, this is really a step, because it's not that you can take back the trauma that's happened, but it is that piece of you can stop yourself from continuing the trauma or reinforcing it going forward.
Yeah.
So,
and no one's looking for it in their business, let's be honest. You know, it's not taught in business school. So let's start talking about it now.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time. We're going to make sure that Nicole's contact info and the assessment are in the comments. So please feel free to reach out to that, to reach out to her. And I just want to thank you so much for being here, Nicole, today. That was just fantastic.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Appreciate you.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.